Welcome back, YouTube. Welcome back to Casual Commander. Today I'm going to come at you with probably the deck I've been most excited to show off. Might be my favorite deck. I don't know. I'll just be honest. The deck so far hasn't worked the way I've wanted it to, but I got some weird text in here, so I don't know. Maybe you guys can look at them and maybe you can, take with it what you will. But this is my Isshin Two Heavens is one deck. It's an attack triggers deck. So there's a lot of things that I would say that a lot of people do run in an Isshin deck that I'm not, but I'm trying different things. So when I say it hasn't been working, it hasn't been working, but I've changed the build up, and I'm looking forward to playtest this here in my next time that me and my buddies get together, which should be here the next couple days. So I will let you guys know how that goes. But yes, Isshin Two Heavens is one. As for usual, because this is a three-colored deck, I'm splitting the lands. I run 39, so I got 13 plains, 13 mountains, 13 swamps. All right. And once again, if you don't want to do that and you want to run non-basics, that is your choice. You can go ahead and do that. You don't need to call me an idiot. Okay, so we run a lot of creatures, so we're going to start with the creatures first. By the way, anyone that doesn't know what Ishin does, if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers additional times. So basically, Yarok the Desecrated, but instead of enter the battlefield, we are doing attack triggers. Okay, so the first one that I feel like you should see in more Ishin decks that you don't is Dreadhorde Arcanist. So when War of the Spark came out, I heard that in this card in Standard was causing quite a lot of problems, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But this is a 1/3 trample zombie wizard for 2 mana. Whenever it attacks, you can grab an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, exile it, as long as the converted mana cost is less than or equal to this thing's current power. So if you have a way to buff this up, you can go grab bigger sorceries or instants. If that card would put in the graveyard, this turn exile instead. So basically, you get to get a second shot at an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. So because of this card, and because of like if you run enough like low drop stuff, I run a few cards in here that I guess I don't normally run, but they're typical cards you would see. But anyway, I'll show you that here in a bit. But Dreadhorde Arcanist, really cool card. As soon as I saw Ishin and I saw this card, I was like, yep, I got to run Dreadhorde Arcanist, and I got to run some stuff to make him work. Okay, so next one, which you would find in most decks, Sky Knight Vanguard, 1/2 flying. It says when it attacks, make a 1/1 soldier creature token that's tapped and attacking. Good card, good value. Once again, I think this is pretty standard. Audacious Thief, whenever it attacks, draw a card and lose a life. Obviously, that'll get doubled, so that gets nice. And I just want to say, so the thing about Ishin that I think makes it kind of a difficult deck, it is similar to Yarok in the sense of, in a Yarok deck, you want to try to save your best enter the battlefield effects for when Yarok's on the board. So when he's not on the board, you're like, should I play that or not? The difference is that in a Yarok deck, you do have blink like instants to blink your creatures once they're already out there, so it kind of gives you an opportunity. With Ishin, you just kind of have to wait up until you get him back out or whatever to get the best use, because there's some of these attack triggers that you're kind of like, it's okay. It only is like when it's doubled is when it becomes like really, really good. But anyway, enough of that rambling. Brina the Demagogue, this is a card that I thought about making as a commander for a time, but then I was like, maybe it's a little too boring. Whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, that opponent has more life than one of your other opponents. That attacking player draws a card, and you put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So basically, you're always going to get the +1/+1 counters regardless, because you are the player that this card is referring to. But if somebody else attacks an opponent and that opponent has more life than another opponent, then that person gets the draw card. But like I said, if that's you, which that should be you every time, then you're good. If you're the one that's attacking, you're going to get that effect because you'll be attacking, you would think, the person with the highest life total. So yeah, the good card in this deck. Krenko, this is a card I wasn't running at first, but I think that was a big mistake. Whenever this card attacks, you put a +1/+1 on it, and then you make a number of 1/1 goblin tokens equal to Krenko's power. So if you have Ishin out, he's going to attack once, or like he'll get the first trigger, put a +1/+1 on him, make him a 2/2, or sorry, a 2/3. You make 2 goblins, and then it happens again. So he puts another counter on himself, and then you make 3 goblins. So basically, you make 5 goblins the first time this thing attacks, as long as you have Ishin on the board. So that's pretty good. Okay, so I run an anger in here because attacking is very important, and we need our stuff to have haste. So I've tried to incorporate that. That's one of the reasons I feel like the deck was failing, was because I think I was only running fervor in here, and that was it. Excuse me. Excuse me. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. So yeah, I added anger in here because I just really felt like the deck needed the extra speed. Any way I could give myself haste, it needed it, because obviously we need to be attacking. So anger's in there. Armored Skyhunter, when it attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library, put an aura equipment from among them onto the battlefield, and if it's an equipment, it automatically gets attached. If it's an aura, that will do it anyway. So I run cards in here that I guess, like I said, maybe a normal Isshin player wouldn't run, but because of the synergy with Skyhunter, I'm like, yeah, I want to run some auras and some equipment. So fun card there. Fireflux Squad, cool card, 4/3 haste. Whenever it attacks, you can exile another target attacking creature you control. If you do, reveal cards to the top of your library until you hit a creature. Put that card on the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Once again, that's really good. You just kind of need a bit of token fodder to kind of get the best use out of that. And I will say one thing real quick. So the old build that I was running, I found like some cool soldier stuff. So I tried kind of turning it into like a mini sub engine of like Soldier Tribal. And I will just say that didn't work. It was cool. Like I was running a bunch of cards that I hadn't really seen anybody use. But the thing that made me change this deck up was when I asked my close buddy Jesse, that you guys have seen on the channel before, and I was like, we were giving all of our decks power rankings, and I was like, what do you think mine is, my Isshin deck? And normally when we ask what our power rankings are for a deck out of 10, most decks are getting, as you know, the joke is like a 7, but most decks are getting like 7, some 8s, maybe some 6s, but for the most part, it's basically 7, 8s, and maybe a 9 if the deck's like really good. He said 3 for this deck, and I was like, damn, and then I couldn't really argue with him. So yeah, had to change it up because the deck just wasn't working. All right, new card, Keeper of the Accord. I'm sure for most, I would say, more competitive EDH players, or just people that know the format, this card is actually really good. It's becoming kind of a white staple because it lets you catch up with ramp, like with lands and with soldiers. So if at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player has more creatures than you make a 1/1 soldier. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, if they have more lands than you get to grab a basic plains from your library and put it on the battlefield top. Obviously, we're mainly in here for the land ramp, but like I said, even though we took out the Soldier Tribal, the fact that this is a human, we have synergies with that. And yeah, it's just a generic, like it's just a really good card. Leonin War Leader, also a soldier. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. I mean, like I said, I don't know if we've covered another soldier. I guess those are the first 3. Was Fireflux is a soldier, Keeper is a soldier. This one's a soldier. Whenever it attacks, create 2 1/1 white cat creature tokens with lifelink tap that are attacking. That's a really good effect. Another soldier. You see what I'm talking about? You can easily turn Isshin, I feel like, into like a human/soldier tribal deck. I know my buddy is doing a Isshin Samurai deck, which I looked at his build and like I was like, okay, it is going to be completely different, so that's cool. This card's pricey, and I get it, but I feel like in this deck it's worth it. It does shut your opponent off from basically doing anything during your turn, and then whenever it attacks, you make a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token where X the number of soldiers you control. Like I said, this kind of was the inspiration of why I was like, oh, I could make this into Soldier Tribal. Like I said, the cards I was running, they're cool. I think they got a few wows at the table, but they weren't winning me the game. The reason why humans matter is because of Winota, Join Our Forces. This is probably one of the best cards in the deck because just getting to cheat stuff out. So whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library, put a human creature from among them on the battlefield, tap and attack, and gains indestructible, which is very important, till end of turn. And then, yeah, you put the rest in the bottom of your library in random order. Really good card. Baylor. Love this card. Every time I see this card, I think of Game of Thrones because that's the episode where Ned Stark gets his head chopped off. Spoilers. So when it attacks or dies, yeah, choose 1 or more. So when in my play group, most of the time we only have 3 players. It's me and my other 2 buddies. We're still looking for a 4th person on a regular basis. So if that were to happen, I would get even more bang for my buck with this card. But as of right now, it's still just a really good card. The value that you get for a 5/5 flying for 5 mana that does all these when it attacks or dies, great. I won't even read these all off. Like I said, you guys can look up Baylor for yourself. And that's the thing I'm going to try to do, guys, is unless I'm explaining like a synergy or a combo, I'll show you the card, but I don't want to have to explain every single one of these. So Draina, I guess the summary is like when it attacks, you get to grab an opponent gets to choose a non-legendary creature from the graveyard. You get to bring that back. So that's good. Ilharg lets us cheat stuff from creatures from our hand onto the battlefield for basically just the turn, then they return, I believe. But he's good. A 6/6 for 5 mana with trample. That's good. Mardu Rough Rider, I'll be honest, this card's kind of a guilty pleasure because there's a dinosaur, I think it's called Territorial Hammer Skull, that I used to run that's only 3 mana and it's just white. But I couldn't deny that like this would be like the only deck I'd get to run this guy in, and like look at the artwork on that. Like the pink, it looks cool. I don't know. He just so the dinosaur says that you get to tap creatures whenever it attacks, and obviously that would get double, but this one says just straight up the target creature can't block. You can make an argument that the dinosaur is better because if it's tapping something, it could stop like a tap effect or force an opponent to use that immediately, or it opens the window for your opponents to attack. But like I said, I just couldn't pass this guy up. This is just guilty pleasure, and I'm just admitting it. Okay, so a card that like I said, I probably should have ran, and I'm happy that I found a spot for it. The Red Praetor, Urabras the Hidden. Creatures you control have haste, and then your opponent's creatures enter the battlefield tapped. For the longest time, I was like, I want to find a deck to run every Praetor in, but for the red one, I was like, I don't know, even though those are good effects, I was like, I don't know what to throw it in. And then like with this deck, I'm like, yep, it's perfect, because clearing the way for my creatures to get in by making theirs tapped and then giving all my stuff haste, it's great. Okay, so because we run Winota, I think an underrated tech card that I don't think anyone's running in an Isshin deck, but should, or a Touch Mage. So the only reason I know about this card is because I just built an Earl the Miststalker deck, which I just put on the channel so you guys can look at that. But this guy, so think about it. Winota says you grab a human and then it comes into the battlefield tapped and attacking. So the cool thing with that is, with Aura Touch Mage, when it enters the battlefield, I get to search my library for an aura and then enchant it onto the mage, as long as the mage is still there. So I can grab some of the dirtiest enchantments that I can find and basically just go, okay, and this kind of comes out of nowhere, and then you just do a lot of damage to somebody. So I'll show you in a second what we've picked as aura targets. But yeah, this card, it's pretty good. And like I said, it's a human, so it's got those synergies. Aurelia, the War Leader, this is a card I wasn't running initially, but it was mainly because I thought it was going to be too expensive. But because of the Double Masters 2022 reprint, it's not that bad. Basically just gives you an additional combat, although Aurelia, because it has vigilance, when it attacks for the first time each turn, untap all creature control. After that, there's additional combat. So basically, creatures that don't have haste, that like come in tapped and attacking or stuff like that, on her additional combat, they're not going to be able to attack. So I just want to keep that clear, because some people do mix that up. You would have to find a way to give them haste. Itali Primal Storm, this is a great card. I think at this point you guys know what this card does. Like I said, you can read it for yourself. I don't love, I've said this before, I don't love throwing Itali into every red deck. This is only the second deck I run it in. The dinosaur deck is the other one. It's not that I don't think it's a great card. It's great. It probably could go in every red deck. But for me, maybe it's because I'm a dinosaur player first. That's the first deck I started with. But it's just like, I want this card to kind of be a little sacred, where I don't just throw it into everything. I feel like it loses its magic. We run all the Titans in here. I mean, you saw, well, no, you haven't seen the other ones yet. But yeah, Grave Titan, he's good, especially in this deck. So nitpicky nerds, you're wrong when you say like this card sucks in Commander. It doesn't. It's not as great as maybe it should be, but in this deck, it really does wonders. Inferno Titan, I got to be honest, at this point, I feel like I'm running Inferno Titan in like 3 or 4 different decks. It's actually getting a lot of work lately, or at least I will be. Olivia, Crimson Bride, when she attacks, you can grab a creature from your graveyard, put it on the battlefield, tap attacking. It gains when you don't control Legendary Vampire, exile this creature. So this card's a little bit of a risk that if they were to get rid of Olivia, you would have to exile the creature that you brought back. But to be honest, being able to bring back any creature in this deck, really great. Rage Thrower. I'm running this because this is a human and because we can make a decent amount of tokens in this deck. So if we have ways to sack those tokens, which there is one way, I'll show you here in a bit, or if we're just killing a lot of our opponent's creatures, this card's ability like to just deal out 2 damage to players is just going to start stacking up. If this wasn't a human, I wouldn't run it, but I've always liked Rage Thrower. I think it's a cool card in Commander, so yeah. Sun Titan, you guys know what Sun Titan does. Engrass Marauders, because it is a human, this is just going to help us deal out even more damage, and we can cheat this out with Winota. Like I said, the main thing is if you're going to run Winota in this deck, and this is the perfect deck to run Winota in the 99, you do need to have a decent amount of targets. The amount of times that I would use Winota, roll through 6, no human, then roll through 6 again because of Isshin, no human. That's crushing, so you do need to get your human count up. Bane of Balaged, great card for this deck. When it attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls. It's not Annihilator because they don't get sacrificed, they get exiled. You could argue maybe that's better. I would still say Annihilator has, I guess, some cooler ability, like synergies. But Drakoseth Maw of Flames. This is another card that I could basically run in 3 or 4 of my decks. I'm working on getting this card in more, but this card's just great. I mean, I know it's 7 mana and I get all that, but the attack trigger is just so good. 4 damage to one thing, 3 damage to 2 other things. It's great. Flying 7/7 for 7, great stats. Karavek the Merciless. This is a card I may take out if I find room for another card. It's in here because it's a human. Once again, I mean, it's a good human that we can run in these colors to work with Minota. So, Silent Sentinel. This is a card I've loved for a while, and it's cheap. And I just was trying to find the right deck that could fit in. I was thinking Zur the Enchanter, which, by the way, that's another deck profile I need to get to you guys. But when this thing attacks, you grab an enchantment from your graveyard to the battlefield. Well, you haven't seen our enchantments yet, but we run a decent amount. And then because we run some auras, I figured this deck would actually be kind of cool to be able to grab those back. And if you got double the attack trigger. Plus, if we run problematic enchantments and our opponents get rid of them, as long as they're not exiling them, this gives us a way to recur them. So, and even if he can't, I mean, he's still a 4/6 flyer. I mean, I get that's not the best for 7, but I'm just saying, like, it's not like he serves no purpose. Tectonic Hellion. This sometimes could backfire on you, but we are playing Mardu. We don't run blue, we don't run green, so you would think that we're not going to be the ones with the most lands. But 8/5 with haste, whenever it attacks, each player who controls the most lands sacrifices 2 lands. So, like that. One of my favorite cards, this is probably my favorite of the Strixhaven Dragons. This is probably the one that I throw the most into my decks. Lorehold, Felmaka's Lorehold. Flying Vigilance Haste for 7, that's really good. 5/5. Whenever it attacks, look at the top 7 cards of your library, cast an instant or sorcery with mana value less than or equal to his current power without paying its mana cost. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. So we have a few instances of sorceries that are just kind of like, all right, this would be good for if we get the Lorehold Dragon. So he's good. And like I said, if that effect doubles, that's nice. Archon of Cruelty. This is a card I used to try to run in Yarok, and then I feel like this Isshin deck works better because, yes, this card will enter the battlefield, but it's only going to really do that once. But you have multiple, you can attack multiple times in a turn possibly, or, just him being able to survive. But the amount of value that you get, so target opponent has to sack a creature or planeswalker, discard a card, lose 3 life, you get to draw a card, gain 3 life, and it's still got decent stats, 6/6 flying for 8. I think it's a cool artwork on a card. It's a cool card. Great card out of Modern Horizons too. Okay, and then lastly, we got some Eldrazi's. Ulamog's Crusher, Annihilator 2, attacks each combat of Fable, 8/8 for 8. Okay, so here's the thing. In a deck like this, like, obviously, if you can afford a Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger or a Kozilek Butcher of Truth that has like Annihilator 4, if you can afford those, go for it. I'm going to build a colorless deck, and I don't like swapping cards over because to me that just seems disingenuous. So if you can afford those and you got extras, go for it. Throw them in here because the more Annihilator you throw in this deck, the better because it'll just get doubled up. But if you are someone that's more trying to do this on a budget, the main 2 that I suggest is Ulamog's Crusher because I think that card's like 40 cents. And then Pathrazer of Ulamog, I think is like $4. Annihilator 3, 9/9 for 11, and then can't be blocked except by 3 more creatures. The important thing with these 2 is they can be brought back from the graveyard. That is important. There's another one, I think it's called... what is it? It's not Artificer of Kozilek. It's a 9 mana guy that when he's cast, you get to bring back a creature from your graveyard. That card's fine. It's just you only get Annihilator 2 after being 9 mana. So I just I decided not to run it. Okay, so let's go on to the enchantments. So the first one, a card that I found randomly. I was just looking up black enchantments because I wanted to see what I could throw in this deck because I don't think I run black auras. Black auras is what I should say. I don't run a whole lot of black auras in anything, and I just wanted to see what was out there. And most of them were meant to go on your opponent's creatures. And then I found this one, and I was like, I've never seen this card before, but it's great. So if you guys came to this video looking for some spicy tech, I would say this is probably candidate number 1. Enchant creature has flying, and then it also has the ability to sack a creature, and then this creature gets +2/+1 until a turn. So you remember the Krenko that we have, and the... What's the soldier girl? Mael or what? Not Mael. What's her name? Myrel, Shield of Argive from Brothers War. So those cards can pump out tokens pretty easily. So if you can enchant this onto either one of the creatures that can pump out tokens or just something else, giving it flying and then being able to just like go crazy, sack your stuff and like fly over. Plus that synergizes with Rage Thrower because if you have Rage Thrower out there, it'll deal 2 damage to a target player every time a creature dies, including your opponents. And then also, when this thing's put into the grave from the battlefield, unlike a normal aura that's going to stay there, this thing just goes back to the hand. So for 3 mana, I feel like this is really good. And like I said, we can get this off Armored Sky Hunter. It gives us more targets for that. And on top of it, if we can also grab it with Aura Touch Mage. So good stuff there. Fervor, I mentioned it before, giving our stuff haste, very important. Pain Magnification. This is like a Rakdos staple for me. If I have a commander deck that runs Rakdos colors, I run Pain Magnification in there. Why? Because it's that little extra... It's that extra nuisance of, like, nobody likes discarding cards, but this is a card that stays on the board. And I know that a damage of 3 or more at once has to be dealt to an opponent, but for them to discard a card, but that happens quite a lot. And a lot of times what I find is if I'm not the one in the lead, my opponents will be like, okay, can I make one of these other guys discard cards so I can kind of get ahead and put them down a bit? So it's not the same as like a Ghostly Prison or a Propaganda, but I noticed that it does incentivize other people to not attack me. So I like that. And I love my opponents discarding cards. Shifting Shadow. So this is a cool card. So it's an aura. Enchant creature has haste, and at the beginning of your upkeep, destroy the creature, which, like I said, we're going to put this on something that we're kind of okay with it going away. Reveal cards on top of your library until you hit a creature. Put that card on the battlefield and attach Shifting Shadow to it. Put all the cards in the bottom of the library in random order. So basically what this is going to do is you're going to enchant this to one of your creatures. You could do it immediately and the creature will have haste. So this would be hey, I want to give this thing haste real quick. The creature will die, at your end step or at your upkeep? Beginning of your upkeep. So it'll stay on the field for a turn. And then the creature will die because of this. And then you go from the top till you hit a creature, put this on it. Then that creature will have haste. So in a deck that has a lot of attack triggers, I feel like this is a good way to cheat out some of our bigger stuff and just kind of continuously do it. So... And it's another aura, so like I said, more synergy. Speaking of another aura, Unquenchable Fury. This is a card that, I mean, so cool. I mean, I can't imagine that they didn't think of Isshin since this was kind of out of the same set. This is Neon Dynasty, but it's the Commander package. Good way to burn people. And then this also has when it hits the graveyard from the battlefield, return it back to your hand. Basically, whenever you attack an opponent, however many cards they have in their hand, this thing will deal that much damage to that player. So with Ishin, that doubles up. So let's just say your opponent has 5 cards in hand. If you have Ishin, it's going to be 10 damage just off Unquenchable Fury. It's pretty good. Breath of Fury, really cool card that I don't think works for a ton of decks, but in this deck, I feel like it works. Like, for instance, like my Earl the Miststalker deck. That wants auras, but I don't pump out a ton of creatures, or at least ones that I want to get rid of, so this card doesn't work. This card I don't like infinites, but I got to be honest, this is a kind of cool one where there's a way where I can just win the game off of like infinite attack steps. Because if you have a creature that can make tokens when it attacks and your opponents can't block it, let's say they have a brief opening where they don't have a way to block it, then you're good. Because you would enchant this onto one of the tokens or whatever you want, swing, as long as it's not the thing that's making the tokens. Once the damage goes through, as long as the creature that you enchant this with can get the damage in, that creature will get sacrificed, you attach this onto another creature, and then you have an additional combat after this, and that can just keep going. So Breath of Fury is cool. Fires of Invention. So Fires of Invention is a card that I think every red player and commander should look out for their decks and just go, can this help me? So the downsides, we'll get to the good sides, but the downsides of Fire of Invention is that you can only cast 2 spells during your turn and you can't cast spells during anybody else's turn. So basically, if you're planning on being like a reactionary deck where you're going to like do flash or do a lot of instants, don't run Fires of Invention. A lot of removal, don't run Fires of Invention. Also, so the cool thing that it does is you may cast spells for mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana cost. So basically, you do not have to tap your lands to cast things. You can if you want to. It says you may, but you don't have to. So I find this card really helpful, especially in a deck that runs equipments. We run a few, but being able to tap your lands to equip things because you're not casting, and then use because basically the point of Fires of Invention, it's a ramp card. So if I'm starting out and I play this on my turn 4, I can then look at my hand, or if my commander is available to play, I can then look at my hand and go, okay, can I cast another card for that much? And then when your next turn comes around, then you're like, okay, I may only have 5 lands, but now I can cast 2 things and basically spend what would have been 10 mana to cast stuff out of my hand, but actually I'm still on turn 5. So it's a good way to ramp. You just got to make sure that it's not harming you in any way. If you're running a deck that you think on a regular basis is going to want to cast 3 things a turn or something like that, I wouldn't run this. By the way, I'll just show it now. Sunbird's Invocation is this is my red staple that I run in every red commander deck. Yes, Fire's Invention does hinder this because if you've cast, let's say you cast Sunbirds and then with Fire's Invention, and then you try to cast another card, the Sunbirds won't trigger because you've cast your second spell for the turn. Because Sunbirds does cast whenever the spell is cast initially, you get to look at the top cards, reveal, and then cast something with lesser or equal mana value from the top. So those two cards interfere, but I would say for the most part, I don't have a whole lot of cards that say cast. Like the zombie, the Dreadhorde Arcanist, he can cast. And then the Velomachus Lowerhold, he can cast. But for the most part, I'm not casting a whole lot of cards. We got a sneak attack in here. The deck before, I didn't have sneak attack in here. It's not because I didn't want it. It's just because it costs a little bit, but I finally got one in here. Sneak attack, do I think it's a fair card? Not really, but at the same time, it's red. Red needs help, so I'm cool with it. But yeah, this is a good way for us to cheat in our big creatures, give them haste, and then try to get those Isshin triggers early on and get some real advantage. Campaign of Vengeance. So I was running Revenge of the Ravens in here because that one says whenever somebody attacks you, you gain 1 life and they lose 1 life for every creature. But I just noticed that that card wasn't putting in the work that I wanted to because I can't guarantee my opponents are going to have like token boards where they're going to have a ton of creatures to attack with. And if they do, like, I don't know, at a certain point, they won't really care. Like, a lot of times, though, they'll come at me with a big creature and I'm like, well, Revenge of Ravens is doing nothing for me. So Campaign of Vengeance just says, like, whenever I attack with a creature I control, defending player loses 1 life and I gain 1 life. So basically, I have more influence over what I'm playing than I can over my opponent. So I know that I have creatures that can make tokens, so I feel like the synergy is better. This is a similar card, but it's amazing. Righteous Cause. Whenever a creature attacks, you gain 1 life. This card's so good. So good. Gleam of Battle. You could run like a Cathar's Crusade, but I noticed that Gleam of Battle, like Cathar's Crusade gets so difficult to try to keep track of sometimes because like when creatures enter, triggers and gives a +1 to everything. You can always run a Cathar's Crusade in here. I used to, but Gleam of Battle is just cool because this will get double the triggers. So like I said, even if you don't have a way of having a lot of new creatures enter, let's say you don't have a token generator, this card will still put in work for your stuff, like just regular creatures that are already on the battlefield that aren't tokens. So I've been wanting to run Gleam of Battle and something for a while, and then Isshin came out, and I was like, perfect, great. And lastly, for the enchantments, Eldrazi Conscription. This is a card that I initially was running an Ural, and then I was like, you know what? I was like, it's got the Annihilator trigger, it's an aura, and I was like, Ural is just fine without this card. I can whoop someone's ass without it. This deck really needs it because, as I showed you, if I do a Winota attack, get an Aura Touch Mage, the Aura Touch Mage comes in tap attacking. This will still happen where I get to go grab my library, go search my library for an Aura. I grab Eldrazi Conscription, and then the Annihilator won't trigger because the creature didn't officially attack, but my Aura Touch Mage will be a 13/13 with Trample, and all of that was just off of a Winota trigger. And that's pretty damn cool. And if I can get this out, normally, I mean, the Annihilator 2 trigger happening twice if you have Isshin out is pretty sweet. Okay, so that's it for the enchantments. We're almost done, guys. Thanks for being patient. Okay, Sorceries. Got to reanimate. That's a 1-drop. The synergy there is obviously we have creatures that we want to bring back. There's also another card I'll show you in a second that helps with this. The main thing is the Dreadhorde Arcanist. This is a 1-drop that, like I said, good card that we would want to use. I love Reanimate. Night's Whisper. Basically, if I'm running a black deck that doesn't run green, I'm probably going to be running Night's Whisper. So you draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life. It's good value for me. Buried Alive. This is what I was talking about with Reanimate. This helps us put the anger in our graveyard. This also can help us put creatures that we want our graveyard to bring back with like Reanimate or whatever. Generally, my package would be anger, and then I'd put the 2 Eldrazi in there to be ready to go to bring those back. Relentless Assault. This is a card I wish I would have known about earlier because I was running decks that were heavy combat the first couple years of Commander, and I wasn't aware of this card. But yeah, great card. After your first combat, you untap all creatures. Then there's an additional combat after the main phase. So Relentless Assault, really, really good. And the main thing is that mana value works really well with Velomachus Lorehold. That's what I've tried to do with this deck is most of the sorceries and instants I want to be within that range of 5 or less because Lorehold's power is 5. Cleansing Nova, destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. I love the flexibility on this card because if you have the bigger creature board presence, you do not have to blow up your board to make an impact on the game because obviously if someone's running an artifact deck or an enchantment deck, like you're fine. Or if the opponent's boards are too problematic, where you're like, yeah, I need a way out of this one, even if I have to get rid of my own stuff, Cleansing Nova can get you out of that. So that's good. Okay, Sinister Waltz. Commander players, we need to have a talk about this card. Why aren't more of you running this card? This card's like 20 cents. So, okay, so think about the synergy in this deck. So we have ways to dump important stuff in our graveyard. So that's good. We have cards that are really powerful and really big that we would want to bring back. And then this card for 5 mana, we can get it off the Velomachus Lorehold, so that's good. But just in general for 5 mana, read this card. Choose 3 target creatures in your graveyard. Return 2 of them at random to the battlefield and put the other on the bottom of your library. For 5 mana, to be able to get 2 of 3 creatures that I picked, I mean, my opponent gets to make the decision. Oh, sorry, it's at random. My opponents don't pick it. It's at random. But still, it's like I have a 66.6% chance of getting the 2 out of 3 that I want. But like, I think that's really good odds. And like I said, if you pick your 3 best creatures out of your graveyard, you're not really going to be disappointed with what ends up happening. So for 5 mana to get 2 creatures and they come in untapped, and like I said, we have many ways to give our stuff haste. This card's really good. More people should probably be running it. Ruinous Ultimatum. If you run a Mardu deck in Commander, you need to be running Ruinous Ultimatum. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. Don't have to tell you why that's good. Okay, so let's get into the artifacts real quick. So you guys have seen in my deck profiles that like I run the medallions. So I don't run the medallions in this deck, and that's because Isshin has no generic mana costs. So the way I figured it, it would save me money until they start reprinting medallions. So that's one reason. But the second reason is, like, if I draw a medallion like in my opening hand, I'm very excited. Like, okay, turn 2, I'm going to reduce it, be able to get my commander out 1 turn sooner. In this deck, if I were to do that and have a medallion in the opening hand, it would do nothing for the commander. Obviously, it could reduce other cards, but yeah. So anyway, I'm running Sword of the Animus because the attack trigger. You guys know what that does. Death Render, because we run a lot of big creatures, so if the creature it's equipped to would die, you just get to cheat another thing out and attach this to it, and then the creature gets a little +2/+2 bonus. But Death Render is a cool card. I've been sitting in my binder for a while, and I was like, hey, that's a good spot for it. Argentum Armor. I know Argentum Armor's got problems. It's big, and I get that if you were to draw this and not be able to cheat it out with Sky Hunter, you're like, dang, that's a big commitment. I get it, but think about it. Being able to blow up 2 target permanents every time something attacks, that's still pretty good, and the +6/+6 buff is nice. So, I mean, if you have Fires of Invention out, you can cheat the equip cost anyway. So, just saying. I mean, there's some synergies. If you guys don't want to run Argentum Armor, I get it. Okay, last but not least, the instance. We run a Path to Exile, and its cousin, we run a Swords to Plowshare. So that's it for the deck profile. And once again, these instances have synergies with Dreadhorde Arcanus because we can cast these again once they're in our graveyard. So that's it for the deck profile. Let me know what you guys think. Ishin's a very popular commander, so I would imagine this deck profile is going to get some views. Like I said, he's really fun, and there's different ways you can build the deck. I just hope you guys respect that there's going to be like some staples that I just don't like the cards, and I'm not running them. So like I'm kind of taking my lumps right now to find a build that is cards that I like while still having a good chance to win. So the cool thing about Isshin is I feel like we're going to be getting support for this commander for years to come, like easily, because attack triggers are fun and they're pretty common. So anyway, that's it for the deck. I should be coming out with another deck profile, but hopefully soon. I'm just waiting for some cards in the mail. I might be able to get my Zur the Enchanter deck profile up to you guys. Let me know if you guys want that. But channel's slightly growing a little bit. I noticed the content, it's starting to get picked up a little bit since I put out some videos. So keep it going, guys. I'm not going to quit this time. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get some better equipment for you guys, not be filming on my phone. All right, that's it. Have a good one, guys.